Hello and welcome to Gatecrashers. Gate 20 is the gate of the now, or the gate of contemplation and presence, being completely oneself in the now. In this Gatecrashers episode, we explore this energy through the character of Nico. This series brings the human design gates to life through story and pattern and lived expression. Gate 20 explores the power of complete presence, being so fully yourself that the now becomes right action. If you're studying human design or exploring your own chart, this may help you recognize the energy in real life. Nico had not packed yet. This was not because he had forgotten. The flight was in 4 hours. The bag was open on the bed. Packing would happen when it happened, which was now, because now was the only time packing or anything else actually took place. The idea of doing it yesterday or last week, or at any point when it was not yet the moment, was a proposition so foreign to Nico's nature that it barely even registered as a thought. His partner, Joel, had made his peace with this, although it had taken a while. In the early years, Joel had offered helpful suggestions, lists, the considerable psychological comfort of knowing the night before a trip that everything was already assembled. Nico had received these suggestions with the warm and slightly puzzled attention of a man engaging with a concept that was genuinely interesting, but had no application to his own life. He understood what Joel meant. He simply could not locate anywhere in his actual experience a reason to do something before the moment required it. The packing for Nico took 11 minutes. It always took approximately 11 minutes. Nico arrived at airports with time to spare and the calm of someone who has never experienced the anxiety of wondering whether he remembered the charger, because the charger was either in the bag, he'd checked. Now, at the moment, it was relevant, or it wasn't. And if it wasn't, that was a now problem, and he would solve it now. Nico also talked. This is worth establishing early because it is part of the same thing. The now was so immediate, the observation or the response or the unfiltered assessment of the situation so entirely present that it came out before the question of timing had a chance to form. Joel called it the verbal equivalent of the packing. It happened when it happened, which was immediately, because immediately was the only option available to Nico when something was real and present and true. He had been told by people who meant it as a criticism that he said too much too soon. He had received this feedback with the same warm puzzlement as the packing suggestions. He understood what they meant, but the now, however, did not consult the calendar before speaking. The times this landed well, it landed completely. Something said with such immediate, unguarded presence that the person receiving it felt genuinely met. Not managed, not considered, but met right here in the actual moment, which is so much rarer than it should be, and which people recognize instinctively when it happens. The times it didn't work so well, it really didn't. But Nico had made his peace with that too. Now, it should be said that not every Nico carries the now the same way. There is another kind, quieter in expression, though no less present. This Nico also has, Gate 20, also has that quality of pure, complete, nowhere else to be presence. But this Nico does not carry Gate 34 alongside it. The sacral engine that in Nico's case means the contemplation and the action are the same thing. Where Nico's now erupts immediately into doing, the bag packed, the words spoken, the thing responded to before the thought has finished forming, this Nico's now is witnessed rather than moved into. The presence is just as complete, the seeing is just as vivid, but the now stays as contemplation rather than becoming immediate physical expression. This Nico is still in the now, watching it with full attention, but not propelled by it. This Nico speaks from the same voice, sees with the same clarity, but there is no restless sacral energy insisting that the seeing become doing immediately and without pause. The now, for this Nico, is enough in itself. Same gate, same pure existential, only possible place to be, now. One Nico is propelled into action by it, the other inhabits it completely and stays. Both are here, entirely, undeniably here, which is rarer than it sounds. The shadow, for our Nico, arrived not as a crisis, but as a grey Sunday that had been going on in various forms for several weeks. Nico had noticed it first in the kitchen, standing in front of the open fridge, on a morning when he would usually have known immediately, instinctively, exactly what he wanted, and finding, instead, a blankness. Not hunger, not hunger, just the fridge, and him, and no particular now to orient around. He'd closed the fridge, he'd opened it again, as though the now might be in a different arrangement of the shelves. It wasn't. This had been happening on and off, not dramatically, nothing you could point to and name, more like a dimming. The vivid, immediate quality of the present had become muffled, as though someone had turned the now down by 2 or 3 degrees, and Nico couldn't find the dial. It had started, he thought, around the time the project at work had begun requiring him to spend large amounts of his day living in other people's timelines. Planning meetings, retrospectives, conversations that took place entirely in the future or in the past, in which Nico was expected to be present, to contribute, to engage, from a time zone in which he didn't naturally inhabit. He had sat through them with the effortful concentration of someone trying to read in a language they know but don't think in. And each time he'd emerge slightly further from his own now, slightly more coated in the residue of then and later. Joel found him still standing in front of the fridge. "Come out," he said, not a question. They went out. No destination. Joel knew better than to propose one. Just out into the morning, into the particular quality of the light at that hour, the immediate physical world of the street and the air and the specific sounds of this neighborhood on this day. Nico was quiet, which Joel understood was not ordinary quiet, but the quiet of someone trying to find something. They walked for 20 minutes before Nico stopped, completely mid-stride, in front of a garden that had apparently exploded overnight into something extraordinary. A wall of something purple and rampant that had no business being that vivid at that hour in the morning. He stood there for a moment, and the now came back, not gradually, but in a pulse. Vivid, immediate, entirely itself. The purple thing on the wall, the specific cold of the air. Joel beside him. This moment which would never exist again and was, right now, complete. Ah, there you are, Joel said quietly. Nico didn't answer immediately. Let the now be enough for a moment without translating it into words. Then he said, I need to stop going to planning meetings. Yeah, that's not going to be possible, Joel replied. No, Nico agreed, but I needed to say it now. Gate 20 lives in the throat center, where the internal becomes expressible, where being becomes speaking and speaking becomes doing. It is the only purely existential gate in the human design system. Every other gate has a role, a function, a contribution to the circuitry. Gate 20 simply is. Presence as its own complete act. Being oneself entirely in this moment as right action. Not right in the moral sense, right in the mechanical sense. The thing that is correct, that is you, that requires nothing added or removed. The I Ching frames this as recognition and awareness in the now, which transforms understanding into right action. The hexagram looks like an archway, the perfection of the way, which is simply to be here as you are right now. Right action is not a decision. It is what happens when presence is complete. Gate 20 has 3 possible channel partners. Gate 10 in the G center, it's the identity in the now. Gate 57 in the splenic center, insight in the now. And Gate 34 in the sacral, power in the now. Nico carries the 34, which makes the channel of charisma. The only true manifesting generator channel, in that it's the only one that goes from the throat to the sacral directly. The sacral's raw power, connecting directly to the throat, the only sacral gate that does that. And the result is a person for whom thought and deed are not sequential, but simultaneous. The now doesn't wait for permission, it simply moves, packs in 11 minutes, stops dead in front of a purple wall, says the thing before the room has been consulted, because the now requires it, and the now is the whole of the authority. Gate 20 alone, without the 34, is a projector gate. The now speaking, the presence, the quality of complete attention needs to be recognized and invited for it to land the way it's capable of landing. With the 34, the manifesting generator dynamic changes the quality. The sacral response is the signal and the action follows without waiting. But even so, even with the engine of the 34 running behind the presence, the quality of Gate 20 at its best is not force. It is not direction or leadership or pulling of others in any particular way. It is something quieter and more complete than that. Being so entirely here that the now becomes in itself the thing that was needed. Not for anyone else's benefit, simply because this is what being alive, fully and without apology, actually looks like. The shadow is the loss of the now, not to the future, Nico doesn't live there, but to that grey middle zone. The indecision that arrives when other people's timelines colonize the present, when the thread of self gets pulled thin by the accumulated weight of then and later. The I am now becomes I am not very sure right now. And Nico, without the now, is like the fridge with nothing in it. He's still himself, but without the vivid immediacy that is his actual nature. And it turns out the thing that makes him most useful to anyone, including himself. The return to the now is never complicated. It is always available, because the now never actually goes anywhere. It simply requires sometimes a walk. a purple wall, the specific cold of a particular morning which will never exist again and is right now entirely sufficient. Nico noticed the light changing on his way home. He said so to Joel immediately. Joel had already noticed, actually. But that was the now doing what the now does. Here, vivid, spoken without calculation, complete in itself, right action, simply being here, which is, when you think about it, everything. Thank you for joining me as we explore Nico and his relationship to Gate 20. I hope you'll join me again for another Gatecrasher exploration. And until then, and as always, look after yourself, love yourself, and go gently.